The press room just went off the rails because when a reporter asked the obvious follow-up about Trump's warning that protesters would be met with force, Karoline Leavitt didn't clarify. She exploded. Instead of answering, she mocked the question, talked like accountability itself was the offense, and threw around consequences like she was trying to scare the press back into silence. You can feel the whole room tighten in real time. So what exactly did the reporter ask that set her off? And why did Leavitt's reaction look less like a spokesperson and more like a threat? Watch what happens next, because the next exchange is where the mask really slips.
The president warned that any protest on Saturday would be met with force. Can you clarify what kind of protest President Trump does support or find acceptable?
The president absolutely supports peaceful protests. He supports the First Amendment. He supports the right of Americans to make their voices heard. He does not support violence of any kind. He does not support assaulting law enforcement officers who are simply trying to do their job. It's very clear for the president what he supports and what he does not. Unfortunately for Democrats, that line has not been made clear, and they've allowed this unrest and this violence to continue, and the president has had to step in.
What question? So if there were peaceful protests on Saturday for the military parade, President Trump would allow that?
Of course the president supports peaceful protests. What a stupid question. Raquel.
Thank you so much, Karoline.
What makes this press briefing moment so revealing isn't just the rudeness, it's what the rudeness is trying to replace. A reporter asks a basic accountability question. The president publicly warned that protests could be met with force. So what exactly counts as an acceptable protest? That's not a trap. That's literally the job. If the White House wants to project strength and claim it respects the First Amendment, then it has to explain where that line is. And instead of treating it like a legitimate request for clarification, the response turns into a sneer, capped off with, "What a stupid question." Here's why that matters. When a government official mocks the question rather than answering it cleanly, they're sending a message to two audiences at once. To supporters, it's a performance of dominance. Look how we don't even entertain their gotchas. To the press, it's a warning. Push too hard and you'll be treated like a joke. And to everyone watching at home, it normalizes the idea that asking for clarity is somehow disrespectful. That's a dangerous inversion. In a democracy, clarify your threat is not a stupid question. It's the most important question. Now, the spokesperson does try to do the standard pivot. The president supports peaceful protests, supports the First Amendment, and does not support violence or attacks on law enforcement. Fine, that's the boilerplate, but the reporter follows up again because boilerplate isn't clarity. The reporter is basically saying, okay, so if people protest peacefully on Saturday, will you respect that? And the answer is yes. So what's the problem? The problem is the tone and the instinct. If the White House truly wanted to lower the temperature, this would have been the easiest layup in the world. Peaceful protests are protected, we support that, and law enforcement will respond to violence. Done. Instead, they layered contempt over the answer. That contempt is not accidental, it's part of the political style. Because contempt does something a clean answer can't do, it creates a villain. It reframes the story away from the president threatened force and toward the media is stupid. That's the whole trick. And notice the subtle shift inside the response. It's not just peaceful versus violent. It also adds attacks on law enforcement, which is a very specific phrase that can be interpreted broadly depending on who's defining attack. In normal times, attack sounds clear. In politicized times, you start to wonder, are they talking about actual assaults, or are they trying to blur the line between physical harm and any kind of confrontation, disruption, or civil disobedience? That's exactly why the reporter asked the question in the first place. The public deserves to know what standard is being used, because standards are what keep power from turning into abuse. This is where the force language becomes the real story. When a leader says force, people don't hear, we'll stop riots. People hear, we might crack down. And if you want to reassure the public, you don't belittle the question. You explain the policy, the thresholds, and the safeguards. You don't have to reveal operational details, but you do have to show that the government isn't treating citizens as enemies for exercising their rights. Instead, the clip ends with the insult and a quick exit. And that ending is the tell. Because if your position is strong, you don't need to swat away a follow-up like it's beneath you. You answer it with confidence and move on. The insult is there to signal power and to discourage more questions. It's also there to feed the content machine. People share the clip not because the answer was informative, but because the attitude was outrageous. And that, ironically, is the point. Outrage travels faster than nuance. So if you can turn scrutiny into a spectacle, you win the algorithm, even if you lose the substance. Politically, this is the broader pattern we keep seeing, governing through posture. It's the same energy as, don't question me, question my enemies. The spokesperson isn't just speaking to the press. She's performing for a base that wants to see the press humiliated. And when politics becomes a permanent performance, the press room stops being a place where the public gets information and becomes a stage where the government demonstrates dominance. But here's the catch. Dominance doesn't pay your rent. Dominance doesn't lower grocery prices. Dominance doesn't fix infrastructure. Dominance doesn't make you safer, not in the long run. What it does is make citizens more polarized, more suspicious, and less able to agree on basic truths. And when a White House spokesperson calls legitimate questions stupid, they're not just attacking a reporter. They're attacking the idea that the public deserves clear answers. So watch what happens in clips like this. The more defensive the posture, the more you should ask what they're trying to avoid. Not because every official is hiding something, but because contempt is often used to cover uncertainty. When leaders are confident in their legal and moral footing, they don't need to bully the question, they can answer it. And if you're a viewer, you don't have to pick a team to demand better. If you're conservative, you should still want a government that respects free speech when it's your side protesting. If you're liberal, you should still want clear standards that prevent violence without criminalizing dissent. Everyone should want a White House that can explain force without acting like the public is too dumb to ask. Because the real stupid thing isn't the question. The real stupid thing is pretending that words like force don't carry weight and then getting mad when the press asks you to define them.